Hello everyone, good afternoon. I know I got a hardest session, right? From the perspective of security as well, after lunch I got a session. Maybe it's designed that way so that we know that all security is an important topic. It keeps all of us having whoever is involved in that industry or overall as an organization or the management, everybody having sleepless night due to security breaches. So that's probably the reason it's kept up, right? So that none of you sleep, right? So that's one of the right. So say get out to the okay. So while I want to keep this session very interactive, so it's going to be only talk about data privacy and protection. But if you have any specific questions, I also would be covering in general what are the challenges and what are the opportunities we see within that challenges is what I'm going to talk about, right? With respect to some of the questions I would cover in other areas you've seen as cloud, how does cloud security come into play, how does the next generation data center as a concept when it comes to a consolidated service, how does that affect overall the scenario of the business and doing the business, right? So instead of doing the challenges first, I'm going to talk about the opportunity, then we'll be better able to kind of correlate very well, how does an opportunity is turning, addressing a challenge, right? So that's what we're going to talk about, right? Obviously, kind of things we know that security is important, right? And all as a security professional, just a question: how many of you are working on security domain, right? It could be network. There's quite a few. But it's good to see. I mean, at least I could say that 10 to 15% people on security. So that doesn't mean that only security people listen to this. I expect all of you to kind of have a focus, and if you have any questions, please do stop me on whenever you have a question, right? So as an opportunity, it's more of supporting the business. In all the previous sessions, you would have seen that IT is not only, it has clearly moved away in the last 15 years or so, clearly moved away from just being enabling the business, right? It's clearly moved away that it has to couple with the business, right? It has to rest with the business, right? It has to support the business. It is a business itself, right? So how does the outcomes are measured? It's not only earlier the CAOs or CISO were just given a budget to manage and run the organization. It is not that. It is directly linked with the outcomes of the business in the particular sector, right? Let's talk about when Gautam talked about when Gautam talked about the case study of the pharmaceutical company, right? So where we can clearly see that how IT has been as an important one, in managing their operations overall globally, right? On how the consolidation is helping. So similarly, I think all other industries as well, and security is not going to be the same, while the principles or we expect that to be at the highest level, right? But each industry will have different requirements, right? Some industry would have a very specific requirement, like financial sector, right? It's to do with the money. It's to do with the money, right? Which means that anything with the numbers and any data related to that, it has to be kept there, right? So given that, I think overall what we are seeing as an opportunity is more of a threat management. So threat can vary from each sector as different, right? Can you tell, anyone of you tell about a threat which would affect an energy sector? Any of the security guys or any of the other other industry folks are working in other areas? Can you think of a threat to an energy sector, right? It could be your power, gas, natural, whatever. So can you think of a security risk there, or what is the threat into the business? Yeah, so that's it. So when we are, as an IT professional, we always think that data, information and that. But when it comes to industry-wide, that is the whole reason Accenture operates in a operating group manner, right? While the services of ours, from the outsourcing to our consulting into the technology or the BPO, all cut across this operating group, right? So there are people who are subject matter experts who would understand how a capital market would run. Right? It's very important, that's how the world is moving, right? All this while, it's been that as an administrator or as an overall IT manager, I would be given a task, this is what it is, you need to manage the servers, you need to make the uptime. It's not going to be like that, or that trend is clearly changing, right? It's about application availability, what is the outcome we are looking. So that's what drives the overall thing, right? So coming to that, energy sector. Let's talk about what are the solutions. I think someone talked about is the metering, right? So when the electrical distribution happens, how do you ensure that from the source to the destination, when I say source, the power gets generated, right? And it gets delivered to the homes or the industries, right? So there are many cases the leakage happens. Right? Without a measurement, we can't ever have that, right? So that's where the solution such as it has to be industrial. Right? I can wholeheartedly forget that. That's because somebody is generating the power, somebody is selling it, money is coming, that's all fine. But how do we bring in the efficiency? That's why solutions such as metering, right? So you will see what is the problem, right? Then it would be like from the source, let's say you have X number at the destination when it reaches, it could be that the threats or the vulnerable things are people, there are non-working meters, right? People, taking the power, power theft rather, right? So that all would get addressed there. So that's why I'm saying when these kind of IT solutions are more and more moving towards close to the business, where it's very relevant to the business, right? And also we all know that more of this security is more controlled by, there are two things. One is business needs, one is compliance requirement, right? Each of the country, though in India we are not at that mature state, I have a slide on from a privacy perspective and a compliance or the data protection perspective, how we are doing in India, right? In comparison to the world, right? So very clearly there are, like ISO 20001, there are regulated requirements like if you process any of the credit card information, you have to adhere to the set of controls as part of the PCA, payment card industry, right? And there are, if you are reporting, you are listed in a US stock exchange, you need to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley requirement, right? Which pretty much talk about some of the IT controls, how do you manage your admin account. If somebody has, let's talk about, there are many threats which I will just slightly go into that. Before that, I just want to give this example, right? In a bank in France, what has happened is that a single man could take more than 20 billion accounts single-handedly within a year, right? That's because the control, need to know basis access was not given. He had access to the trading system, to the clearing system. So obviously he could play around with that. So somebody understand that. That is the reason security is always always the layers of security would help, need to know basis. So these are the compliance requirement. While it is sometimes it's seen as an expensive affair, but it is mainly designed with address that challenges, right? How do we protect the information? So at the end, let's talk about that incident. 20 billion or 20 million going away from somebody's account, and if it is proven that a single man or woman can do that, it's definitely a threat to the business, right? So what is the reputation that organization would have, right? The next time would you go to the same bank, would you lose no money? No, right? So that's directly integrated or directly coupled with the business, right? It will definitely affect. Let's say so the 20 billion out of 100 customers you have, 80% of them pull that saying that I don't want to be with your bank. That's it, right? So it is going to affect. So that's the implication or the results we would see on that. Right? And also just you talk about the opportunities that expanded cloud usage. So more and more we are seeing cloud getting cloud organization either evaluating. So there are only three, as Neeraj mentioned, there are either organization already moved to the public cloud or private cloud. Still people are thinking about, some of them are thinking, definitely most of them are thinking today. If you tell me that an organization from a small medium enterprise to the big enterprise, right? If you are talking about they are not thinking about cloud, then there is something wrong there, right? So extremely. Right? So while security is a major concern in cloud, there also get addressed in various ways, right? Wherein what we talk about multi-tenant, as when software as a service or the infrastructure as a service comes in, right? That's where the assessment would determine that what is the best way for the organization, right? Whether you go private cloud, public cloud, how do you compartmentalize the data? If let's say one provider has 10 customers from that Salesforce.com, I'm just taking that as an example so that we can relate that, right? Let's talk about 10 clients coming in. As long as I'm able to keep that separate in a different databases and the access is restricted only to the client and the set of controls are there, process-wise, technology and people access, so I think that addresses that issue. So there are various ways, and it's again, it's to do with the data, mainly the data. When we come to the data, we talk about it, right? Obviously, while there will be much of controls, definitely your financial report, which is getting prepared for next quarter, you're generating that, which is not in the public domain. You don't want to put it to a public cloud or a cloud wherein the access are seen with relaxed, right? Or someone else has access. Obviously, that are the consideration. We will see that. So, I just quickly covered this in my talk only, but just that you can have a look at that. What are the challenges and the threats, right? Attacker sophistication, right? So it's more of a technology, right? How people are like the example I gave out, the bank, right? He could clearly understand how the system was working, and he had access to execute that. Or he could, hook along with another person who had another access. They know that how the things were working, right? So that is the reason in security, in many of the things we talk about need to know basis, job rotation, right? In many of the places, in many of the financial organization or for the military organization, some of the people doing their jobs get changed very frequently, right? If you have, I have to give a local context. Talk about Indian government, banks, right? I mean, if your parents have worked or someone have worked, I'm sure they would have seen a number of transfers, right? You would have seen a number of transfers. It is not by choice; that's how it is designed, right? To make sure that there is no kind of they don't get together Muthu and Michi back, right? So that's one of the reasons also it is done. So it's it's done with the intention, but it directly goes to the you can closely relate to the job rotation what in the back end is being done. Right? So so that are the challenges we talked about how do we address. So just the next slide just to give what are the and the news can come immediately, right? Anything comes in, you can see in the press, right? That damage is more than what you have earned probably in a number of years. There are organizations which were closed down due to a security threat, right? That's because they lost all their data. Or let's talk about patent, which we talked about one of the case study. If I am making a patent, before filing a patent, if it gets handed to my competitor, I would have invested millions of money for that research, right? At the end of the day, I am not doing a charity. As in business, anybody is not doing a charity, right? I am investing money, so with the intention that I will get an outcome, and I will file the patent, it will get successful, I will get the return on that, right? But at the moment, when that goes away, then you have lost everything, right? And somebody else, maybe then it's a court battle, all that. So that is the reason that brings in the importance of the data. Why the data is very important. Data is increasingly getting important. As a country, from India, I think we are. So how many of you know that PII, the concept as PII, PII, personally identifiable information. So what are they? Your name, your social security number or whatever you have, your PAN number for that matter, right? It could be very closely linked with your personal life, right? In each country, it is seen as different, right? In the US, social security number is definitely a highly confidential information, right? You don't need to solve it. You don't need to know my social security number, right? So, but here do we do that? No, we are not there. So, as a country, I think we have a lot to do. But from a business perspective, as we are delivering a lot of work to the global clients, as an organization, as an outsourcing provider or a technology provider, we need to have that controls in place as well. So that is something, internal security, that's not the focus on today's session. Right, so if I read this, I will just go to the next session. The main what we will talk about on data security. So, I mean the CA is the whoever has been reading for in security, that's in confidentiality, integrity and availability is the most security credit which is there. That's what we try to protect, right? So whenever I need something need to be available, that's a key thing, right? So that security needs to help there. And when the data is confidential, it is not to be disclosed, there has to be a confidentiality. And integrity. If the data may be there, right? But if somebody rings with the data, instead of put $10, somebody puts, transfer the money $10, I could transfer from bank's account to $10,000. Right? So that data integrity is not there. So the back end, if changes in the database or anything, so that's what we talk about, data integrity. Right? So what is data security? So we all now fairly understand why the data is important and why the security needs to be there within data, right? How to protect the data. So data security is that basically keeping that data which are important to the business or a personally identifiable information from external threat, internal threats, and making sure that the integrity of the data is intact, right? Instead of somebody changing it, right? It could be same thing. I mean, you could go with any of the other example as well, right? We talked about a patent or a molecule development within, a pharma. You are developing a drug, right? And somebody in the back end changed the vaccinations or chemicals or what are the ingredients go into that. Somebody changes that. See the results out of it, right? During the manufacturing process. So that is one of the reasons, the data integrity. So anything to do with the data which is business critical, which is personally identifiable information, definitely that's where the data security and the privacy comes into the picture. Any questions so far? Okay, so coming to the data protection and privacy, I mean, we pretty much talked about it. What is it? So I'll probably give a couple of seconds for you to read through that. So what it talks about is that why it is important to protect anything data considered as business critical and the personal, right? And why an organization should have an efficient process of data protection and privacy, right? How do you keep the privacy of that information? So that's some of the data privacy related ones, right? And as I said, that there are a couple of examples. You can see that pretty much T-Mobile lost customer data, and this is something. These are the information very Western centric. That's because this is seen as a breach, right? Again, as a country, we are maybe in most of the Asian countries, we don't see that as a data breach, right? So how many of you get that telemarketing calls, right? You always be wondering, why? How do they get the number? How a credit card guy calls me, how a marketing guy gets the number? So that's data breach. Why should someone else get my data unauthorized? That's my personal number, right? Why should I get that call? So obviously, to solve that, we always have a reactive. So there are one thing we can do is a proactive, the other one is reactive, right? So and more so, I think we get into reactive more than say that don't call directly DNB phone. Yeah, do not call DNB directly, right? So that's a reactive way, right? Instead, think about a scenario where the recipient is where these are not available in general, like what is available here, right? You have seen in many news channels, an agent giving 5,000 rupees, getting all the mobile numbers from a service provider, right? A year back or something, that was the news, right? So that is probably not possible. So that's when it happens in Germany or where data privacy centric countries, it is more seen as a big breach, which is which directly affects the operators who are maintaining the business. The legislation, they put heavy fines on the organization which breach the data. Right? We'll talk about some of the places. Very common other thing I have at least come across, or as an organization we help the clients address is that in all sectors, right? For healthcare, right? There are pen drives lost with patient history of 180,000 patient history, right? And it's freely available in the internet, right? Nothing. You can talk about this WikiLeaks, right? And you have to see that all the military related information, their war strategy, or how they did in each of the activity were available freely. So the amount of damage, you see that, right? So there are comments like somebody US ambassador commenting about some of the other country officials, that all were in the public, right? It was not good to see. So which was meant to be in a confidential domain, which was meant for very personal consumption within a particular need to know basis, that is breach. So that's where I think the challenge is coming. Right, so why do we need a data protection? I think we talked, so that you can just quickly read through that. The business drivers are obviously the regulatory compliance. Obviously some of the things we do, I mean, as a human, somebody has to tell us what to do. Right, and that comes from our education to everything we do. Right, so regulatory compliance directs that what you need to do from a privacy perspective, from an intellectual property, protection perspective, and legal readiness and ability to respond. If anything happens, how quickly you can do that. Right, so that's one of the challenges. Are, I think, in any of the security challenge, there will be definitely a people element. Right, people, process, technology. That's cut across that. And people element more so is very relevant. That's because nobody can analyze what a brain thinks of a person. Right? You can put hundreds of things, but always somebody thinks about how to breach that. So that is the reason there are process-oriented things also very important. That, apart from technology and the tooling, what you get in. So that's one of the things. So the implications are, if there is a data breach, we have talked about it. Shareholders' interest, right? So from the value of $1 billion worth of company in a single day, you can talk about one of the IT company which financial fraud came into picture, right? The share price dropped from like the highest level to 7-8 rupees. That was like almost more than 3,000-4,000% in a couple of days. Kind of it has come down drastically, right? So which is that's what. So shareholders would kind of it doesn't protect the shareholders' interest, right? So which is clearly so. So that are the live examples we have seen that, right? What does it happen? Apart from doing damage to the overall that organization, it damages the shareholder interest, who invested the money, right? And overall people working on that employees, it affects everyone, right? So that's the reason data is very important. Time and again we have seen that in many places, right? So you can see that from a country perspective, right? So that is a low privacy orientation, high privacy. You can see that India being in the both sides, the left side it is a data security and compliance, how good or oriented the countries are, right? And the extreme, the right side are low privacy and the high privacy orientation. Obviously you can see most of the countries in the European region, they are highly protecting from a privacy perspective as well, and also on the data security and compliance. How do we comply, right? And you can see that all the developing countries or the BRICS, what we call India, Russia, and all, we are still at the lower side. So there is a lot more thing to come up there, right? So we have to, the mature state would be the latest cylindrical line back to Germany, Swiss, Canada, and Belgium, Netherlands. So they are very, very. You could clearly kind of, when you interact with any of the clients or the requirements which comes as part of, if I have to closely relate to the services business in the IT, the amount of security controls we need to bring in to get any of the work executed is high when you get from that countries. It clearly could map that, and it's industry specific. Right, so this has been picked up from a survey in 2011, right? So what are the data breaches and what are the categories it has been done, right? So last are stolen devices, which I think pretty much pen drive, right? Everyone has it now, and it used to be very expensive now. In like 600-700 rupees, you can get a of like 8 GB or 4 GB of cards, right? So which means that everything gets copied into that, and it's easily you can easily use that, right? Third-party clubs, right? So you have vendors, you have your partners, you have your customers. You can get exposed, your data can be exposed to the world by them as well. So it's very important. So when you do with business, critical business, then the confidentiality or the data protection need to be there. That clauses needs to be built as part of the contract. So overall, then I have to relate to the overall any other business. So that's where our clients, based on their operating group, if it is a financial sector client, their security requirements are extremely difficult, and healthcare is different, energy sector is different. So that's how our delivery mechanism would work from a IT services perspective. For the client also it applies the same, right? So missing backup data, right? Probably I think the scenario from not taking backup to backup have clearly changed over the years, right? But how good are we in, or the organizations getting the data when they want it? That is so that is one of the missing backup data, right? And they would have stored in some warehouse, right? But no record, they can't recover the data. There's no point. Then again, so it's similar to you have lost the data because you don't have the backup, right? So that's how it works, right? Paper documents. Right? There are many companies. There are many companies follow the paperless office, but still there are instead for government organization in India or some of the other countries where the paper heavy. You could see anywhere you walk in, you could see number of files lying in there. Right? And they are not. Some of the files are not for public consumption. Right? But generally, I think that's where you would have seen that we are data security and compliance and the privacy we are pretty low. Right? That's one of the reasons. Right? And hackers obviously 19, and the hackers percentage is going up and up. Right? Okay, all right. Risks and unknown. Okay, so these are the experience with Accenture's experience. What we have seen: people, process, technology. right? And I mean, I covered through in last 20-25 minutes. I talked through that. I think just we can have a quick view on that. How does it affect? Right? You can see that people being the topmost, priority there. So people again and the process, technology, that all has to work when that is needed. And this is just a single slider to summarize. How do we take any of the security requirement, prevent, detect, and respond. And you can again clearly see that it cut across all the prevent, detect, respond activities, which is people, process, technology also come into that, right? And we could probably map into some of the technologies, some of the process what we get to see on a daily basis. Right? So that's one. Right, so that's all from a slide perspective I have, right? So, but I just had a quick, given that Neeraj was talking about Cloud Center of Excellence. In Accenture, we do have something called Security Center of Excellence, right? Which comprises of a Security Operations Center, which addresses to threats of 24/7 threat management and incident response to our clients. And we do have something called Threat Vulnerability Management, where the experienced penetration testers, they are ethical hacking, right? So they are ethical hackers penetrate into the client application and see that the applications are built securely, right? And the secure coding practices were followed, all that gets in there. And another thing within that security center of excellence is the solution factory, wherein for the newer technologies we have skilled people available for the client. So we keep training them and we build assets. That's one of the Accenture's core value. You have seen Accenture's delivery methodology, all that. So while most of it is runs with the standard processes, we always also work towards innovating things. One of them is available within the brochure she got, high performance security operations. We invest a lot of money on how could we, apart, there are hundreds of products available for each of the things what we seen in the prevent, detect and response activities, right? So how Accenture addresses that and make it client relevant, that's where we invest a lot of money, like other areas. That's where one of the concepts which came in was high performance security operations. If you have interest towards that, you can just go through that and do that. And I think I have twice got a timeout notice, right? So just if you have any questions, I can take otherwise.